About a month ago from Key West, I shared with all of you how I was going to start to live life a little more fully and how my intention moving forward was to also start talking a little more about work-life balance. You know, originally back in August of 19, a part of me wanted to make this podcast solely about this trade and utility business and only talk about this business. But I often made a sincere attempt to share others' journey with you and tie that to the business best I could. I hope that over the last year we've kept your attention for those who live to work, but also presented option to those who work to live. I turned the big 5-1 last week, and what I've learned is that you can't mentally survive experiencing life through only one lens. I assure you that as I look back over the last 30 years in this business, I've given everything. I've given it my all. This trade's been so very good to all of us and provided particularly for me and my family like no other regular job could do. With that reward came hard work and sacrifice. This business is very consuming. There's no other way to put it, and the sacrifices are things that I've put off until a more convenient time simply never got done. I'm not talking about those odd jobs or honeydews around the house. I'm talking about the things in life where people close to you don't really need something to be fixed or built, but they need you, your attention, your time, most of all, your presence. This first episode with the new direction comes from me listening to an audiobook on Audible. Not sure if you've taken advantage of the offer on our website or not, but I highly encourage you to do so. We can talk about that later. The gentleman I sat down with today is a fellow Tennessean, and what started off as an interest to me has grown into simply an obsession. While I'm intrigued about the topic of Mount Everest, and what I've missed in the whole experience of this book I'm going to talk to you about today is Mark Johnson and his wife Holly, or should I say Holly and her husband Mark, had a bucket list. A real list, mind you, and both of them kept it at the forefront of their daily life. What you're about to hear is how life often presents opportunities to us, and we're consumed with what we think is real life. Unless we're paying close attention, things often slip through our fingers in the matter of a few seconds. Listen to Mark share his story of his book, but most of all, listen for the few seconds of pure happenstance where Holly and Mark seize the moment and accomplish something few people will ever do. My hope is after you listen to this that you'll refocus your priorities, document your ambitions and goals, that you will be more attentive to your surroundings, but most of all, you will seize the moment when those opportunities present themselves. So get comfortable, get somewhere you can absorb this next hour without distractions, and walk with me as Mark Johnson shares his story and along the way takes us to Mount Everest. I have Mark Johnson, who is the author of Doofus Dad Does Everest Base Camp. Is that right, Mark?
That's right. That's it.
You've done another book too, right?
I have. It's called Blow the Man Down. It's kind of a prequel to Doofus Dad Does Everest Base Camp. They're both memoirs. The first one is more of a travel experience, as you know, and the first book is more of a travel experience. The second book is more of a memoir of my career in the music business in the 1990s, leading up to when we went to Everest. So it gives you a sense of kind of how I got from point A to point B.
I told you a little bit ago how I listened to your book 3 times, starting on the 4th time this week. But at night, I'm a podcast junkie. I listen to talk radio a lot, but with the virus and politics and stuff, I try to steer clear of anything that fills me with more emotion, negative emotion, I guess, than what I have in my daily life already. So I look for things to occupy my mind. So one day I'm looking through podcasts and looking through different things and books and Google and stuff, and I stumbled upon your book on Audible. I have Audible as one of the sponsors of the show.
Okay.
You can get a free book, download books, etc. So I'm looking in Audible and I stumble across your book. So I download it, and as I mentioned earlier, you and I chatting before I press the record button. Jessica and I walk every morning, and I started listening to your book. So here I am in Orlando, 4:30 in the morning, walking, listening to your book about being in Nepal and hiking to Everest Base Camp, and it just consumed me. Honestly, I couldn't stop listening to it. I caught myself listening to it probably sometimes when I shouldn't have been. I should have either been working, sleeping, eating, etc., but whatever. So, but anyway, so tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about yourself before I
Sure.
get into the book. Tell me a little bit about yourself and who you are, where you live,
Okay.
your background, and then we'll move into the next part.
Sure. And let me say right off the bat that I'm honored that anybody would listen to my book 2 or 3 times. So very big thanks, and
Yeah.
I'm honored. I'm honored to hear that. So I've had a bit of a Forrest Gump type life, to be honest with you. I was born in Raleigh, North Carolina, and when I was a kid, my dad was editor of Progressive Farmer magazine, and this was in the '60s. And anybody in the ag industry will recognize, if they've been in agriculture for a long time, they'll probably recognize the name of that magazine. And during his travels around the Southeast, he fell in love with the Christmas tree industry. And so he ended up buying a farm in the North Carolina mountains and started growing Christmas trees and selling Christmas trees in down in Raleigh, North Carolina. Again, when I was just a little kid, and that progressed to the point at which, in the mid '70s, Dad moved our entire family from a 3,000 square foot suburban home into about a 700 square foot 100-year-old farmhouse way down in a holla in the northwest mountains of North Carolina. And that really began an adventure for all of us, where my dad became instrumental in the development of Fraser fir Christmas trees on the east coast of the United States, and became really one of the pioneers in that industry. And my brother and sister and I, there's 3 of us, we grew up working in the fields, not only in Christmas trees, but in tobacco and sorghum molasses and strawberries and a few other things. But the Christmas trees was our main industry. And as I was doing that, I had parents that really encouraged us to do well. They told us that we could do whatever we put our mind to and whatever we are willing to work for. I think that kind of got into to all of us. Although my brother ended up staying in the ag industry with my dad, my sister went off to do other things. She got married and went off to have her life, and I got into the music business. So from about 1985 through about 1999, I was a singer songwriter, musician, traveling musician. I played clubs and venues all over America and in the Caribbean. I thought for many, many years that was going to be what I did for the rest of my life. When I found my wife in the late '90s, we got married. About that coincided with me being a little burned out with traveling in the music industry. And my as I mentioned before, my first book covers that whole lifestyle and that process. And the music industry has changed quite a bit over the past 20 years. It's changed drastically over the past 20 years. But I'll tell you, as much fun as it was, the big time Nashville industry could be really cutthroat and not particularly nice. By the late 1990s, I was ready to do something else. That led me to getting a position with Tennessee Farmers Cooperative in the early 2000s as a writer and an assistant editor for a big agricultural magazine. It was really weird. It was this circle of life type thing where when I got into my 30s, I started doing exactly what my dad had done when he was in his 20s and 30s. I was traveling around the state of Tennessee, interviewing farmers, writing stories, ag-based stories, and it was great. I loved that. That went on for a decade. That led me to a position with the Tennessee Wildlife Federation as their communications director. And then that led into this crazy thing that I'm doing now that my wife and I do together, which is Hobnail Trekking Company and other various home-based businesses. So we've kind of become, after all these years, we've become entrepreneurs. Writing these books and podcasting and blogging, all of that has been part of it. But it's been a long road to bring us to where we are. And what I've learned through this whole process is you have to be open to God's timing and pay attention to what He's putting in front of your face. When an opportunity is provided, maybe you should follow it and go for it and see where it takes you. For us, it took us to the base of Mount Everest. That's kind of the nutshell right there.
Let's talk about that, God's timing, a second, because you started this business, Hobnail Trekking, and it was all just instantaneous, pretty much thinking, or correct me if I'm wrong, from a ride share one night. Was it Lyft or Uber one day?
Lyft,
you had your car in the shop or something. Can you tell that story, how that went down?
Well, and I have to back up a little bit too, to let you know what frame of mind we were in, or I was in when that happened. So Holly and I read a book called Into Thin Air by John Krakauer, which is a very famous Mount Everest climbing book.
Oh yeah.
It talks about the 1996 disaster on Mount Everest, and that became the movie Everest, or the movie Everest is based on that book. We just happened to read that in the early 2000s. Holly read it first, my wife, and I can still remember us sitting in bed, her reading that, me reading something else, and her saying, "Honey, you have to read this book. As soon as I'm done, you're going to read this. This is crazy. This is just gripping, And I knew nothing more about Everest than anybody else. I wasn't any kind of expert on that. So I read it, and just like her, I was just blown away by that book. And honestly, I thought that's where it was going to end. A few years later, she somehow found out that trekking to Everest Base Camp was a thing. That was something that people did. She came home and told me this one day, and she was like, we need to put that on our bucket list. That's something I would love to do that. I don't know what it would take or anything, but we need to put it on our bucket list. She actually had a physical bucket list, this cardboard thing, and she wrote it on there. Again, like a lot of people, people make a bucket list, but you never really seriously think that you're going to do the stuff that you put on your bucket list. It's more of an exercise, but most people just are like, yeah, if I get rich, if I strike oil someday, I'm going to do that. But most bucket lists just fall by the wayside. Honestly, that's what I thought was going to happen with this. Then you fast forward to 2016. We took our kids to Disney World for the first big vacation we'd ever had. One of the days that we were there, we went to the Animal Kingdom. And at the Animal Kingdom, if you've ever been to Disney World, they have a Nepal area and an Everest roller coaster ride. It was really fun. It was like our favorite roller coaster there. But in the process of standing in line for this, you're in an.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. You're in amazing. A Nepal building.
Yeah.
Holly and I were.
It's the only ride at Disney World that I enjoy waiting in line.
Oh my gosh, it is so cool. And
yeah,
we were equally as enthralled by the surroundings of that place as we were by the ride itself. So that got us fired up again about Nepal. So we come home, that was in February. In August of that year, my job at the Wildlife Federation had run its course, and I knew it, and I was ready to move on. I was actually applying to other communications positions. And this one night, I saw a listing for a communications position at Lyft, the rideshare company. So I applied for it. And by the way, I never got a call back. So anyway, so I applied for it. The next morning, I dropped my old F-150 truck off at my mechanics that needed some work. I took an Uber back to my office, which is about 2 miles away. And then that afternoon, they called and said, your truck's ready. So I decided